Good afternoon. I'm Randy Deere, and I'd like to welcome you to the September 24th, 2019 Code Enforcement and Nuisance Board. I'll call to order, Tabitha.
Yes. Deere?
Yes.
Simpson?
Yes.
Dearbone?
Yes.
Eggleton?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff, please. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the board has had an opportunity to look over the August 27th minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions?
Move to accept.
Second?
Simpson? Eggleton? Deere?
Yes.
Simpson?
Yes.
Dearbone?
Yes.
Eggleton?
Yes.
Thomas?
Okay, moving on to the hearing agenda. Case 1, parking citation, BG 124040. Respondent, August Gravette. Officer Michelle Owens. Is Ms. Owens? Would you like to?
Ms. Gravette, if I'm saying the enunciation correctly, is not here, it would stand as written, Mr.
Is
Chairman.
anyone, is Miss or Mr. Gravette here? Citation stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, case 2. Case 2019-7154. Citation 2019-13210. Property address 1655 Chestnut Street. Respondent John W. Ridley. Officer James Hetty. Mr. Hetty, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, yes,
Okay.
sir. This property, 1655, will mirror pretty much 1661, but both of them with the same landowner, but they're pretty similar. 1655 Chestnut, I had a complaint, let's see, November the 27th regarding the gravel driveway. Yes, okay. The first inspection, it shows the front gravel driveway. It's legally non-conforming. It hadn't been expanded, and it's, that right there is fine. However, the back part of the property, the rear, had a gravel parking area on Mimosa Avenue that had been expanded, and therefore it's in violation. The first inspection was, let's see, December the 10th on that one. This is the aerial photo of the 2017, and it shows the expanded gravel added. 2015, the aerial, the little red block area shows that it's not expanded on that one.
All right, obviously, I'm not keeping up with what we're looking at here.
Yes, sir.
Is there a pointer or something that you can show us this that you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, where the cursor is right now, there's a red box around there. That's Mimosa Drive on the back
I
side
see
of
it
the
now.
Chestnut. On this, the 2017 aerial shows the gravel, you can clearly see. And then the 2015 aerial, where the cursor is, it shows that it's not expanded. And the same with the 2011. There's different aerials, but that's just a few that picked out. But the 2011 shows it's not expanded also. There's a street view. Not every street has a street view, but however, Mimosa had street view for 2015. Shows June and shows a vehicle parked there. And there should be, the next one should be a June 2012 street view. And it ended up being a black vehicle, but there's another vehicle parked on that section too. Second inspection was February, and There again, it shows, well, a couple cars parked there, and you can tell that from the street view, there was just one car, and now it's expanded, you can park 2 cars there. September 3rd, I sent a message via email requesting an update, and Mr. Ridley had another attorney, Kevin Brooks, that was representing him then. Anyway, Mr. Brooks is no longer representing him, but on, let's see, September the 11th, I delivered a citation to attorney Mr. Brian Stennett for both this property. This was the first offense for this property, and another one for the next property that we'll talk about. September the 17th, I spoke with Mr. Ridley, and he advised he's got a paving contract with Scotty's since April, so the property should be in compliance soon. But as of right now, that's the way it looks.
Anything else?
No, sir. No.
Mr. Ridley here?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it'd be very good if we go ahead and show 1661 as well, so that I can address both properties at the same time. My information be redundant.
We can do that.
Sense.
Sure.
Is that all right with you guys?
Yep. Okay, so we're going to head and address both cases at the same time. This is citation number, case number 2019548, citation 201913221, and the property is 1661 Chestnut Street. The respondent's John Ridley and officers James Heddy, and we will address these at
Yes, sir,
the
Commissioner.
same time.
1661 had a complaint October the 2nd regarding cars illegally parking down Mimosa Avenue around the 1661 Chestnut. I had an inspection on October the 4th, and this gravel has been added, and it's, let's see, that was the first inspection. Second inspection was May the 28th of 2018, and should have aerials. Can you move the cursor for me? This, much like the other one, the aerials of the 2019, it shows the gravelled area, and there the cursor showing the red box there. The 2017 doesn't show the gravel there. 2019 gravel, 2017 no gravel. 2015, the street view shows it's just grass. And June the 2012 street view shows it's grass. Had another inspection August the 23rd. No movement or compliance yet. So September 3rd, I sent the message requesting an update. September the 11th, I delivered the citations, one for the other property, and this was the second offense on this property. I had hand-delivered a citation back in January. I believe it was on the 17th. So this was actually the second offense for this property. Again, September the 17th, I talked to Mr. Ridley, and he advised he's had a paving contract with Scotty since the April, and the property should be in compliance soon. Brad, can you, as of right now, the September the 5th, that's the view of how it looks. It's still the same.
Anything else? Okay. Mr. Ridley?
Folks, for allowing me to come and,
You,
oh,
swear-
sure.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Amen, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Let's-
very much for the opportunity.
Let's
to-
take, let's take one at a time, but let's take the first one, 1655. If there are
probably
any
the best-
different, if
that's
there's
probably
any
the best.
difference between the two.
Yeah. I think I need to give a little backstory on how this has all transpired, because, I mean, we're showing photographs from 2012, and I didn't own the real estate during that period. But I do think it's important, because I think in this room, I'm probably the only person that knows more about this real estate than anybody. And the reason is, in 1973, over 45 years ago, my first wife and I lived in a log house straight across the Mimosa Alley, and the lady's name that owned the log cabin was Mrs. Rigsby, and her house faced Normal Boulevard. And if you remember many years ago, that whole Normal Boulevard was full of Victorian-type homes that faced WKU. And her husband had built this log house. So I walked to class every day and passed every piece of real estate that I'm talking about this evening. I did that. So I've got better information. I don't have photographs from 1973, but I can assure you I know what I'm talking about in that regard, so help me God. 1655, this spot right here, has been occupied by one family when the property was purchased and built in 1913, and one family lived in it until it was sold to an owner, and then I bought it within a couple of months later. So this entrance, and I've got evidence of all this that I feel like that you all need to see because of the circumstances behind this. This was an entrance to that real estate for at least 100 years. Whether they've got photographs that there is or is not gravel, yay, nay, whatever, that has been in existence for that period of time. Now, my biggest problem with all this is before I bought this real estate, Scott Murphy Daniel dug a trench across Mimosa Alley, and they used this area as a staging area and poured gravel in this space, had tile. I think I've got a photograph of that, but it would be easy to see from Scott Murphy Daniel when they did that construction work. So nothing was ever done. It looked like an eyesore. And after I purchased it, I did level out the areas and clean up the edges. My mother would say, tidied the edges. Now, did it expand it 6 feet on one and 2 on another? Might have. So that is, I will admit, that has been happening. But again, it existed before, and it is as it is now. So I have a photograph, which I think is extremely important. May I approach the...
Sure.
Pass that out to I think I do have 5 copies. I'm sorry I
Okay.
don't have some for the
All the same, no.
What I'd like to point out in this photograph is that not beyond my control whether I own this in 1973 or what, the city of Bowling Green put in 2 major head walls and a drainage tile, and at their discretion, they put gravel at that entrance. They didn't pave it. They knew what the code was. But yet, me as a landowner and a homeowner, after I tidy up the property, I'm expected to pave this area. And quite frankly, gentlemen and ladies, I don't think that's right. There's several things about this I don't think is right. So that addresses the entrance and egress of a piece of real estate at 1655. It was established way before I was even born. I knew about it in 1974, and all I did was tidy up the areas. Now, my problem is I was trying to do something nice for somebody. I have a letter from the College Heights Foundation at WKU, and some of you all are very aware of this group. They give scholarships away and manage the funds for scholarships to students. I have a very deep relationship with these people, and they were in the midst of making a decision of whether they were going to tear down the existing building up on campus
Ms. Eglin, you know exactly where that is, or whether they were going to buy a piece of real estate. And I was deeply involved in that entire process. In fact, one of my clients gave $1 million to do whatever they were going to do. Fast forward almost a year, they were in negotiations of buying a piece of property at 1703. Many of you might know it's at the Chief Justice's house, John Minton. And the funds that were given purchased that house, but no one could be told about it because it was a confidential arrangement. I went to the city, I went down there and told them what was going on. I had allowed them to park in these spaces. The one particular one that we're looking at there had already been created by somebody else. Once again, I just tidied it up, put a little fresh gravel in the areas that needed it and leveled it, kept it swept, the leaves blown off, so that the College Heights Foundation could use those spaces until they could move into 1703. In that transaction, they came to me and said, well, one of our ladies that works here, their husband works at Scotty's, and they'd be more than happy to freshen up the other area, the one we're going to talk about here in a second. Now, everybody says, well, look at this aerial photograph from 2000. There was gravel there because there's a 16-foot entrance on 1601. I'll show you a photograph of that as well. So here is a letter from Mr. Smith. I asked him because I told him I was coming down here, from the president of the College Heights Foundation, Donald Smith. It explains, I think in detail, that there never was an intent to put a parking lot in here, that it was nothing more than a temporary situation. But due to their circumstances, this has lasted in excess of a year. Now, many of you already know that that transaction has taken place. It's now called the Cliff Todd Center. It's the antebellum home, the white home at 1703. So I guess if I'm guilty of something, I'm guilty of trying to help some people out and not establish. But what's amazing to me is that what I discovered is that these people are doing their job. I'm not complaining about that this process is complaint-driven. Well, why, after 100 years of an ingress and egress, is somebody picking on John Ridley because I've got an entrance that has existed forever? Don't think that's right. And that's the second I don't think is right. The next thing I want to show you, and again, this is all still related to both properties, but we're focusing on 1655. These are photographs of 18 pieces of real estate in and around where my property is. I have 2.8 acres right there on Chestnut Street with 2 homes on it. We can go through every one of them if you want to, but the basic point is there's gravel lots all in and around my property. And they've been there for years. We can take the aerial photographs and I can show you. Particularly several of them on Mimosa Alley were gravel in 1973 when I lived there, and I'll be more than happy to point them out. So here's my question to this group. Number one, how can we cite citizens in Bowling Green for violation of codes that existed prior to? So when I asked the staff, and I asked this question, what about all these others? Well, they've been grandfathered in. I say, how old's the grandfather got to be if he was born in 1913? So that's my position on this. One, I'm trying to do something nice. So, again, I paid the first fine. That was advice of counsel. Didn't think it was right. I wanted to come in here and explain to you all what was going on. And then on my last piece of evidence, I think that Mr. Hetty has already mentioned it. This is a letter dated April the 17th from Mr. Kent Jones of Scotty's Construction. April. I had contacted Scotty's back in December or something and said, as soon as you open the plant again, I need to get this project done because the city's kind of after me on this thing and I'm trying to make it right. It's going to be winter time and how can we get it done and so forth. And that was, again, while the gravel was all leveled and everything was all fixed up a little bit. But the point that makes is that I have put out the effort and I've tried to communicate. Now, my attorney somewhere it got lost in translation. Mr. Hetty's been very nice when I call him on the phone. This isn't an adversarial thing with him or any of the staff. But I do think that my problem with Bowling Green is that when people try to improve their real estate, I had no idea that I couldn't do this. I mean, honest to God, I had no idea because I drove up and down Mimosa Alley and they existed everywhere and had since 1973. So why I couldn't do it? Well, then, of course, this complaint-driven process that these folks have to live under. And so my excuse is I don't think I ought to be fined because I'm making every effort to change it. Now, what's the outcome of this? The outcome is the city put in the head walls. They didn't pave it, and yet I'm having to pay it. Again, I don't think that's right. in both properties, they put the head walls in and didn't pave back to my property line. So the end result is, I can either do a couple of things. Number one, I can pave that whole thing and call it a basketball court, and put up 2 goals and shoot hoops as many times as I want to all day and turn it over to as many students as I want to, because it's my real estate. The other one, I propose to you that's since 19 and 13 has always been there, and once again, the city didn't pave it when they put the head walls in. So I don't think this is right in any regard. Now, the end result is College Heights is going to move. Nobody's going to be parking there other than the tenants of my real estate. And so that's my case. And that's on 1665. And then the last photograph this is 1661. And here is a much larger head wall, color protection, and a larger opening. And if you'll notice the fence and the gate has been there for many, many years, and it was gravel regardless of what that photograph says. And all of us know, when you have a gravel area, grass creeps in and grows over the top of it. Brush and stuff grows up through the middle of it. I mean, that's not uncommon. And when I went in there, I cleaned it all up. I re-graveled over the area that had been gravel for many years, and that's the case. So I'm asking all of you to void this penalty so that I can get this straightened out. And as I said, my good intention of allowing the College Heights Foundation to park there kind of got all off base.
Mr. Ridley, is this an estimate, or is this a contract, or a handshake, or do you have a contract with Scotty's at this point?
I have a verbal. They're supposed to be done. I think if you look on there, these are the times that I began to start calling because they were promised to go ahead and do it. And in fact, one of the neighbors down there has had some paving done, and they were supposed to do it when they did that, and when I called the young man. Now, the other part of this is I didn't go into that in detail, but when I started this process in December, I had contacted Scotty's. There was a gentleman, not Kent Jones, but somebody else, and he came, gave me a quote. I said, let's get the job done, and then he left the company, me waiting until spring. When then spring came, I said, well, you're not doing my work, and that's when Mr. Kent Jones came out on the 17th and said, here's what it'll cost you. So it's about a $4,000 pop to me. But once again, I think really the issue is if the city's going to do this, why weren't they consistent with everybody over all these years, and why all of a sudden I bought the real estate? I don't know if y'all remember the Jimmy Stickles lot, but I mean, it was a jungle, sawbriars, trees falling down, garbage everywhere, and I went in there and cleaned the whole thing up. It looks like an estate. So I think there's a lot of inconsistencies, particularly in that neighborhood, and then when somebody goes in and tries to improve it, we kind of penalize them. And so that's the reason I don't think I ought to pay this fine, because I'm trying to straighten it out. But whatever you all decide, I promise you I'll do what you tell me.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Ridley, notation on this last, this email from Kent Jones, 9/17/19. I assume that's your notation. Will
All
prep
that's
on
my
Friday
handwriting
the
of when I
20th.
make. I usually do that when I've got something like that. Talk to so-and-so. You know, when you call somebody back and say, well, I called and left a message. Well, when did you do it? Well, it was at 3:15 on such and such a day. I've always done that.
Okay.
So they did on Friday of last week, what they call prep. That's where if you'll drive by tonight, and I did this just a few hours ago, they've already kind of cut all of that out in the area that the city should have paved once again. I still don't know. That's the first trigger to me. You know, the city constructs a culvert, then they require the homeowner to gravel. Well, I didn't put that in. Even the previous owner didn't. So the city ought to be paving that, not me. So that might be a breakdown between code enforcement and whether the city ought to be completing their jobs, but.
It's used for parking now, though, right?
I'm sorry?
It's used for parking now?
It is for College Heights, yes, sir. Yeah. Or my tenants that live in those residences, I mean, they can park cars out there. I mean, I looked into that. I mean, my tenants don't have to park on Chestnut Street. They can park, well, there's 3 in one and 2 in another. I could put 5 cars in these spaces and be in complete compliance. But it's triggered on 2 things. Number one, the requirement of the paving, which nobody in the neighborhood is doing and haven't for 45 years. And then the other trigger is that I've allowed a not-for-profit providing scholarships for the university to park there until they get their new building. So
In what building are the Clyde Chase Foundation staff currently working?
Sorry?
I know that when they moved out of the building next to Weatherby Administration Building, they moved to another building temporarily. Are they now in the former Minton home?
No, they still aren't. In
Okay.
fact, if you'll read that letter, he says that he's apologizing why it's taken so long. They meant to be there in the spring. I think that we had translated
Okay.
that
So
to the staff.
what building are they currently
They're in
occupying?
the Honors College, which is diagonally up the alley.
Okay.
They park in these spaces, and then they walk to that space. Now, Donald told me today, he said, well, we don't want to get you in trouble. I said, look, this was all out of good intentions. I mean, it's not, I wasn't trying to sneak in under the radar and develop. That's another thing that really kind of ticks me off in the early stages of this. My good buddy, Alex Downing, lives right across the street from my real estate. And he's got a great big paved area. It's not just a turnaround. And he's got students that have been parking there for years. I mean, they don't live in his house, but they park there. And up and down that street, and also all the rentals, when you have a rental, no one is policing that the person parking there is living in that space. There is no policing of that. But there's policing of John Ridley and John Ridley's real estate. Well, we need to be going to these others and say, are you living in this house? And if you're not, then that property owner is in violation as well. But even Judge Minton, Chief Justice of the Kentucky Supreme Court, there were people parking in his driveway that they didn't live there. So, I mean, see, there's some major inconsistencies of how we're enforcing. And if it's complaint-driven, anybody that drives down the street can say, I think they ought to fine John Ridley. I don't think that's right. Especially since there has been so many other pieces of real estate that have existed for years, and nothing's done about that. So, as I said, I'm at your disposal. You tell me what to do. I play by the rules. Boom, I'll do it.
Thank you for coming, and you've done a good job of presenting your case.
Thank you so much.
Wait one. Have you told these folks, related any of this information given to us tonight to these folks?
I went and met with Mr. Ben Pierce, and I asked to speak to him. He brought a whole staff in when this whole thing started, and I said, can you explain to me why I'm being singled out? And I took these photographs that you say, I said, here's a property right next door. I went through this in a much more, early fashion.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, well, that's where I learned that, we're complaint-driven. And this is what I said to him. I said, then I want to complain on every property owner that is here. Now, when you look at those photographs, I think out of all of those, there's only been 2 out of 18 that have paid. 2. So that's 16 that still haven't paid, but I'm standing before you tonight because I've been fined again. So you follow what I'm saying here? I mean, I'm trying to be cooperative, but yet what's going on with these others? I mean, some of those are all the way up on State Street, but it's still extension of Mimosa Alley. Some are on Regents. I mean, that's a paved street. It's not an alleyway. So that's the reason I kind of get jazzed about this. I mean, it just doesn't seem consistent. And I like to be consistent. If I'm going to play by the rules, everybody ought to have to play by the rules. So that's the reason I'm asking you not to fine me. Thank you.
One question, are you going to get this paved? Is it your intention?
Well,
to
the
pave this?
contract, I have altered the contract because they told me I had to remove the gravel. Well, I'm not going to get into this twice again.
Yeah.
Pave it, then somebody come back and say, oh, you've got 2 guests parking there and you're trying to develop a parking lot. You know, the interesting thing, one of those that
Right.
y'all are looking on there, and I think he's an attorney for this body or one of the bodies of the planning commission, one of them's Hamps Moore. Hamp Moore's got gravel in his space. It's not as tidy as mine. He maybe ought to dress it up a little bit, but it's got gravel, and one of them is a picture of his office. I mean, the back part of his house that opens onto Mimosa Alley. But because mine's tidy and neat and clean, has Hamp been fined? I'd like to see the records of how many citations he's got, and how come he's not paving his area. So I think there's this inconsistency, and I don't think it's right. Thank you, guys. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Ridley.
Yeah.
You said you met with the staff and you had presented all of this information. What response did you get from the
We're doing our job. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what they told me. We're just doing our job.
Okay, second question, you mentioned you wanted everyone treated the same. Have you made a formal complaint about any of the others?
I did, on the day that I met, when they delivered
Is
that
it in
message.
writing, or do we have a record of
I
that?
handed them the photographs of all the things, and I said, I would like to make a formal complaint, because it's my understanding that all you've got to do is call down there and say, there's trash on the street, there's this or that, and that's how this starts. It's not, I hired a lawyer to write a letter to them to complain. It's just anybody and everybody. I really think the driving factor of this is there's some neighbors in there that are concerned about what I might do with that real estate. That's what it is. And so they're either trying to drive me out of the market, but I own historical real estate all over Bowling Green. I haven't done anything but improve every bit of it. So do you see where I'm going with this incentive? Why would I put more capital in something to make it look good if every time I do, this kind of happens and I'm treated differently than everybody else?
Can I ask the staff, do you have a record of the complaints?
Yes, sir. Those complaints, probably the same photos that he turned in. I did due diligence, and I inspected every facility or every property. There was some that was legally non-conforming, which is, Mr. Ridley says it's not tidied up. If it hasn't been expanded or added to, then it's what's considered the legally non-conforming. It is the way it is. If they add to it or expanded it, then therefore it throws it into, it needs to bring, the property needs to come up to the ordinance right now. The way it is I think the paving or the different parking ordinance was in June of 2001. So anything before that, if you didn't touch it, didn't tidy it up, didn't do anything, then that's fine. Some of those properties, most of them, 3/4 of them that I looked at were that way. There was a few that they did change, and therefore they had to bring it up to the norm, or the current ordinance. And therefore there's 3 of them I could think of that's paved. There's one that's pending, that's been in here through our board, and then Mr. Ridley's properties. But it pretty much, it started with that. At that meeting, there was 22, I think it's 23 counting his own, that was turned in, and they're all looked at.
So in essence, if they can have gravel, and if they try to clean that up or change that in any way, that voids the 2001 grandfather.
Yeah, the grandfathering's nullified. Then you need to bring it up to the current ordinance, which that means paving with concrete or asphalt or brick pavers, different things. So if the property's left alone, like the front of one of those photos, it showed the front, it's been an entrance the same way, that was fine. That was legally non-conforming.
It's my property you're speaking about.
Yes, sir. 1655. The back had been expanded. Therefore, it made that where it has to be brought into the current ordinance.
So was that expanded by the city of Bowling Green?
I can't speak to that. I can just look at the aerials and see when the dates were way it looked like, and then all of a sudden here it is, it's different.
Mr. Ridley, was that expanded by the city of Bowling Green? City of Bowling Green, you brought that
I have no idea. I purchased the property in the summer of the fall of 2017, so it took me about a year to get everything cleaned up and nice. But once again, I really think this is important to look at your photographs. Up Mimosa Alley at the back of the Baptist Student Union building, all they did was go in and they just gravelled a space, and it's got a sign and it says this parking is for Baptist Student Union. Well, why is that not paved? It's been there as long as mine has. I mean, the freshness, I'm saying about this freshness deal. Oh, if you touch it. Well, we all know that gravel moves around on a parking lot, and people go in and they tidy it up and they take a backhoe and drag it out and so forth. Well, every one of those things are changes, but they're still gravel. So we either need to tighten up the rules, or we need to let it go as when somebody tries to clean it up, it improves the neighborhood.
That piece of property is Westerns, and it's in a different category from where it's I can't think of the name of it, but it's I'm drawing a blank. But what he's talking about is it's a public, or it's a government, I guess you could call it.
Quasi-government entity.
Yeah, so it's
But Baptist Student Union is not part of Western. It's affiliated with Western, but it's not a university building.
Yes, I believe that was, I'd have to look back at my research stuff. This has been months ago, but that was given to Western. It's not, it's a Western entity. So it's a government
May I ask this question?
property.
Is that public property? Now, they may have allowed the Baptist Student Union to construct there, but is it still owned by Western? Western's not subject to planning and zoning, and that's an unusual dynamic, but it's a government property, so they don't have to comply with planning and zoning. A little frustrating at times, but that's the way it's always been. One other thing I'd like to point, non-conforming pre-existing use is what they're talking about. That's the long legal term. We adopted planning and zoning as we know it in 1969, countywide. Lots of things existed before that time. I would disagree just a little bit with you on this. You can maintain property. You cannot change its character. The gravel, you could put some gravel down, but if you had pea gravel, you couldn't put those big chunks of gravel in, or you couldn't, oil and gravel, I can't think of.
Chip and seal.
Chip and seal, thank you. You couldn't do that. You couldn't make a substantial change in it. Lots of times what happens is a house will burn, and as long as it's not burned down completely, and it's restored, and it was a non-conforming pre-existing use, it stays that way. So you just can't change its character. You can put it back the way it was. So I would kind of disagree on the argument about you can't do anything. You can put some, but you can't change it dramatically.
How long will it
Mr.
take to get this work done?
Well, I mean, they prepped it and they told me they were gonna have it done actually before.
Now, what do you
the-
mean prepped?
Well, they have to level the gravel out to be able to
Okay.
put the flat asphalt down. You've seen that on highways, you know, where they clean everything up and then they pave the whole thing. Well, that's what that is. That's the prepping. And so they did that Friday once again, I don't think I shouldn't be doing that. I'm doing that just because I think the city should do it. They're the ones that put the head walls in. And I don't understand how the city cannot do what they're requiring me to do, and that's to pave those entrance and egrets. That first is the first thing. But I really appreciate Mr. Broderick pointing out to me that Western doesn't have any rules, so the solution to all of this is for me to just give the real estate to Western, and you all will have no control over it whatsoever. So I'm in here today trying to improve a piece of real estate that is trying to keep it in compliance, make the neighborhood look good, and really what I ought to do is I ought to give it to Western. And that'll end all
Probably
this.
be waiting for you outside.
Don't you think they are? Don't you think that I might have gotten a phone call about that? So I'm just here, like I said, I'm a citizen, I'm trying to improve real estate, I'm trying to live within the rules. I don't understand the consistency. I don't understand why the city can do what they want to do and then come back to me and say, why aren't you paving this?
That's what, wait a minute, that's what I was asking a little bit ago. What did the city do? I need to get that. What did the city do?
May I approach
Let's
him?
go back. Yeah, let's go back with the pictures and show.
Well, that won't show the head walls, because that's the ditch is the city's property to keep up and clean. And the culverts there, if you go up and down that
Yeah,
street.
I'm looking at the culverts right here.
All right, those are head walls and those are culverts. Well, if they're requiring me to pave that area, that's the city's responsibility to pave that. They put that in, I didn't. Now, it's gonna cost me a few $1,000s to pave something I think the city should have done.
What was in there before the city did that work?
Gravel, just like it is now. It was just not tidied up.
So they're returning it to the state that it was in,
Who is?
the city. It was gravel, you say, and it's now gravel. So.
City put those head walls in 20 years ago.
But
I have
what
no
was the surface?
gravel.
So they returned it to the same standard that it had, the same condition, gravel to gravel.
No, once they put the culverts in, I mean, it was just a ditch there. They put culverts in, then they gravelled, so it was gravel when the construction project was finished.
How'd you get across the ditch?
I didn't own the real estate, sir. I didn't own it till 2017. This was put in.
Don't get angry, we're trying to
I'm
get
not,
at this.
I'm just trying to
All
get the
right.
timeline, because we're starting to jumble things up here, and,
No, we're not.
okay, that's fine.
So when people buy this property, are they're notified of the grandfathering system? Are they understood? Is it something where he was told when he bought this, this is how it's supposed to be maintained, or else you fall out of that category?
No, sir.
You wouldn't be told anything, Ryan. Be no notice. Unfortunately, it's an assumption that you should know, and that's easier said than done.
Mr. Ridley, I asked you earlier, how long do you think it would take to finish the work by Scotty's?
I've been at their disposal, sir, for 7 months. I can't tell you that. I know that I talked to him. They prepped it last Thursday. He told me he was going to do it this week. That's the second or third promise that I've said. When the crews are there, they're going to do it. But that's all I can tell you. I mean, that's all I know.
It's not a big job, I mean.
No, but I mean, it's just like anybody. I mean, you know, well, I got 2 shingles on my roof. When are the roofer going to come fix it? Well, that's the last job he's going to do, and it might be right before it rains next time. But so I don't know. The first excuse was, well, the guy that gave me the quote last year left the company. Well, that wasn't my problem. That's Scotty's. Then I got recontacted when I got this next violation, which my attorney told me go ahead and pay $300, which I thought, well, that really ought to go toward what they're trying to get me to do, but I didn't oppose it because I thought I'd get it finished. So.
Let me ask counsel, can we table this for 30 days and then see if it's paid?
It won't be completed by then because I'm going to have to tell College Heights. The letter said that Mr. Smith was saying that they're not going to be in the other building. So what you will tell me if we do it for 30 days, I'll have to put pressure on Scotty. I don't really think I can do that. But to get the job done, and then I'll just tell the College Heights Foundation that the planning and zoning want them to be off that because it's in violation, and they'll just have to find somewhere else until they move in.
Yes, you can.
I'd recommend we do that, a motion that we table this for 30 days and come back and visit it again.
I don't think 30 days is sufficient.
I would say
When you're
60
working
at
with
this
a
point.
contractor that you have no control over.
Yeah, the other thing too, they're gonna stop paving probably before December. If the weather, as soon as the weather cools down, they're gonna start paving. They'll stop.
No, they don't.
They don't?
Stop. It has to be so cold before they stop. No, they won't stop right away. They'll be paving in December.
Usually, the earliest you hear the asphalt plants closing is Thanksgiving, and that's kind of changed dramatically. And so I think
I think this past
what-
year,
let's-
it was right before Christmas.
We will have a November meeting. Is that correct? We'll have a
Correct.
November, and usually we don't have a December meeting.
Correct.
So let's put, I would like to, go ahead and make your motion, Jack. I mean, I'm saying 60
Well, I'll amend it
days.
and make it 60 days.
Yeah, let's make it till our November meeting. And that, I think that's fair for
Thank you very
everyone.
much. So you haven't,
And
60 days or what? If it's finished?
hold on 1 second though, before you guys do
Well,
that.
let her look at, see how many days we got on it till our November
The
meeting.
next meeting is, in November, will be November 26th. I don't know how many days that is in between, but you can just say until the November 26th meeting.
By November 26th.
Right. And then, are you wanting to combine both of these? Or are you saying,
Yes.
making the motion for both?
I'll make it for both.
Thomas and Deere, was that
Second,
right?
yeah.
Okay. Deere,
Yes.
Simpson,
Read the motion, please.
okay. We're gonna table these two
Okay.
cases until November 26th.
Yes,
Okay, Simpson,
yes.
Dearbone,
Abstain?
Eggleton,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Okay.
see you in November.
thank you all. Hope not.
Thank you.
Western might own it by then.
Okay. Moving on, case number, let's see, case number 4. Case 2019-2673, citation 2019-5125.6, 1302 Eastland Street. Respondent Nick Wilkins, Officer Brad Chargarowski.
case is the result of a roaming inspection that was conducted on April 10th of 2019. It was brought before the board on appeal of a citation at the August meeting of this year. On the 17th of this month, Mr. Wilkins called to inform me that the painting work had been completed and that the house was in compliance. On the 18th, I re-inspected. I found the property to be sufficiently in compliance for me to close the case. It was open for 160 days. Pictures are on the screen in front of you. Pretty much all of them are before and after. You see the property as it was brought to you last month at the meeting for the appeal on the left, and the status on the 18th on the right-hand side. This is the opposite side of the house. The columns, which were deteriorating and also had peeling, flaking, and chipping paint. Another view of those as well as the soffit fascia and gutter area of the front of the house. The remaining violations or parts that are not completely in compliance are going to be around the windows and the windows themselves. I believe Mr. Wilkins had explained to the board that he was planning to replace all of the windows. But as of now, based on the overall progress of the peeling, flaking, chipping paint on the majority of the house, I have closed the case. Again, the windows are still not in great shape, but the columns and everything else are. Our staff request is the same as it was last month, to uphold the citation and fine.
Hey, Mr. Wilkins.
Sir.
Tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Sir.
Good.
I just, as we mentioned last time, I have getting a quote, I think this Friday, the gentleman is supposed to be meeting me to do the replacement windows and get a price for them. So that's all I lack as far as getting it done. I feel like I was in compliance of getting it done when I was, this extra 30 days. So I have not paid the fine yet, according to someone that told me that, wait till this is all settled. So the fine has not been paid. If I need to, I just need to know yes or no. I did get it taken care of, so I feel like the fine should be waived.
Okay. Any discussion, questions? I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to uphold the citation, but dismiss the fine in the amount of $154.
Second.
Deere, Eggleton, Deere,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes.
Dearbone,
Yes.
Eggleton,
Yes.
Thomas.
No.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sir, you guys need to have a little bit more fun in your job.
Do you have extras?
You have red socks on?
Okay, case number 5. Case 2019-6262, citation 2019-11392, 1722 Chestnut Street, owner Robert B. Williams, Officer Matt Powell. Officer Powell? Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do.
Okay.
So pretty briefly, on August the 2nd, we received a complaint about a foul odor along Chestnut Street. Took a look at that, realized it was a failing sewer lift station. Contacted BGMU, thought that'd be the end of it. As it turns out, we heard back, and the lift station is privately owned, privately maintained, solely the responsibility of the property owner. So on the 5th, we took a look at it due to the amount of sewage that was being discharged and the condition that kind of indicated that had been carrying on for a while. We decided that this was egregious and skipped straight to the citation phase. Issued the citation, heard back from the property owner a couple of days later who wished to appeal that citation. We actually helped him fill that paperwork out so that he could get that in. After the citation was issued, he did aggressively pursue his contractor to get the matter resolved, whereas before he'd been having some trouble getting those guys interested. Ultimately, by August the 22nd, when I took a look at it, the area was drying out, the lift station had been repaired, and the discharge of sewage had been ceased. So our recommendation was that we uphold the citation but waive the fine.
let's see, Mr. Williams? I'll swear you both in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay. Who's the,
I help run the apartment and the maintenance man, Jimmy Neal.
hey, Mr. Gill?
I'm the one who called Stuart Ritchie, and we have a signed contract. They was just taking their time.
Yeah.
They kept telling me, we're waiting on the parts, we're waiting on the parts. But we did have a contract, and they was not, but right after I told them we got signed and stuff, automatically they got the parts in and started getting it done.
I think they ordered it then.
But we did have a contract signed to get them over, but for some odd reason, they was just dragging their feet. And, he had bought and paid for brand new pumps. It's brand new system altogether, up and going great. Stuart Ritchie came out a couple times to pump it out, but they took so long, it just kept building up. So, but it is fixed and done, and we got it nice and going.
No problems now.
All right. Any questions for either Mr. Powell or Mr. Gill? Or Mr. Williams, Mr. Gill, I'm sorry. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we uphold the citation but waive the fine.
Second.
Dearbone, Simpson. Deere.
Yes.
Simpson.
Yes.
Dearbone.
Yes.
Eggleton.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this is our contract and our warranty and everything, so.
You need to laminate it.
Yeah, my wife used to make some coffee.
Robert, behave yourself.
Y'all have a good Friday.
Mow that grass, too.
He also reads for me. I can no longer read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else on the announcements or new business, comments, announcements, anything that?
Actually, we do have an announcement.
Okay.
If you don't mind standing up for us, Joseph. Joseph Schmidt, he is our newest code enforcement officer. We just recently hired him. It's his second day on the job. So.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
I'm a little bit concerned about a lot of the things Mr. Ridley said there, and I don't know what we can do about them, but I really, he made some good points.
Delaney, if you may, Mr. Powell here might have some background information on some of those public work projects that he was dealing with earlier
Okay,
as
but
well.
I'm not sure about the policy, and you made a comment that we changed the rule in 2001. How does anybody that's not read all your stuff know that they're out of
You know,
order?
I agree with
Is,
Delane from a standpoint that, I mean, it looks, and I know you guys are following the letter of the law. That's not the question.
No.
That's not the question at all. But the question is, it does look like the inconsistencies, and I think I'm probably speaking for Delane.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they don't, how would people know before they come in here that,
Avoiding the permit process.
excuse me, go ahead.
That second, just to address it from a public works standpoint, some of you I don't know, I'm the environmental manager for the city of Bowling Green. I've been here for about 13 years. That means I handle all of our stormwater issues. One of the things that he's neglecting to mention is for that second one, the lower down the street one, that's a paving permit required site. So I'm sitting back there listening, going, not only is he not in compliance because of the gravel that he's added, he needs to come to us for a permit. Yeah, that is ubiquitous. That's been that way for a very long time. It's greater than 750 square feet worth of new paving. During that process, we would be able to explain to him exactly what all the rules are because he's working without a permit right now. The second point that he's making about the culverts. Culverts slow down water in ditches, and we typically don't add those unless they're quite necessary or they pre-existed for the property owner. So for Mr. Ridley to say that the city came out and just added some culverts, That would add to the cost of the project. It would disrupt the flow of water down the ditch line of Mimosa Alley. So therefore, those culverts would have been there before. I can pull those records. That would have been about 10 years ago that we re-rocked that ditch. I remember us doing it. But we would have either replaced what culverts were there, or we would have worked with those property owners. We didn't just come out and surprise anybody with a new culvert.
Well, that's
So-
what I was asking him, is
And
gravel to gravel.
Yes, and we would have done it in like kind. So whatever we found there, we would have gone to the edge of the right-of-way with like material. So if we added a culvert and there was a gravel entrance there, we would have gravelled over the top of that culvert to the gravel. Had there been asphalt, we would have put asphalt back. But to his point that we should pave, we don't pave on private property for him or anybody else. We would never go beyond the edge of right-of-way, regardless. So I can probably, and I've made myself some notes, before your all's next meeting, I can go back and see whether or not we still have the plans for when we re-rock the ditch for Mimosa Alley. To your point, the point that you were making, and I couldn't agree with you more, is if there weren't culverts there before, then there certainly wasn't gravel there before, because you couldn't have gotten across the ditch to get back there anyway. So Brad kept saying, come up here, and I was like, that's not my place, my friend, but Mr. Thomas is well aware of what we're trying to get at here. But there was a couple of things that I felt he was a little disingenuous about. The thing that goes along with why that ordinance is that way, Regent already floods pretty significantly. There are 3 homes between Normal and coming back up Regent toward Chestnut. Most of those are university property now, but they've been flooding concerns for an extremely long time. That's a pretty odd little karst area down there where we're constantly trying to keep that cleaned out. In an area like that, the more gravel paving you add, the more water, and we already can't fit it.
I think we're in open session and being televised and all that good stuff. Should we continue this conversation?
I think it's fine.
Okay, I didn't know.
Did not know that, but I don't take back. I don't take back anything that we had to say. We're more than happy to go back through the records and find what was there. But yes, it would be extraordinarily surprising for me to learn that we added culverts that weren't there already or weren't negotiated with the property owner. And that rule about additional gravel, additional hard surfaces is there so that we can plan for the stormwater runoff for an entire neighborhood, not for just a particular location.
And as far as an owner needing to or find out what they should know before they purchase a property, it's their responsibility to find out what they need to know before they do something to change their property. So
Does Mr. Ridley own a number of homes?
I have no idea.
Yes, he does, as well as buildings around the square.
He owns the old Pushins building. I call it the Pushins building. I don't know what else.
Pushins,
to call it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He owns, now, the house that y'all have been looking at, Dr. Stickles' house. And after Dr. Stickles was a teacher in the history department forever and ever. After he passed away, his daughter and son lived there. Jimmy Stickles was somewhat eccentric. He only rode a bicycle because I don't think he could ever get a driver's license. It was his agility issue. But he was a University of Virginia Law School graduate too. He was a bright man. But they didn't really do anything to maintain that area. I grew up on 1760 Normal Drive and still own it. And I went up Mimosa Alley all the time, and it was not vastly different from what it was when I was in grade school and high school and college high a long, long time ago. If I could tell you there were culverts there, I couldn't. At my age, that wasn't anything I was paying any attention to. I was doing good to stay on the gravel road. But that area has kind of been like that for a long, long time. Most of those gravel driveways are pre-existing. I can remember it on Normal Drive when we asphalted ours, and that was in the 50s, and the house was built in 47. So people just didn't, asphalt was not used that much in that area.
Have we had any other complaints of a similar nature in that area?
When he turned those in, there was, I believe 22 and then 23 counting himself. One of them, he said Camp Moore was one of them, where Camp's property, he hasn't changed. So there was a number of different ones that when I looked, they're legally non-conforming before, like Mr. was, I couldn't remember exempt. For some reason, that had left me. But anyway, government exempt. With that, with Judge Minton's property being given to Western, it was exempt also. So there's different ones. When I looked at each one of those properties that he had turned in, I personally looked at each one and looked at aerials, looked at street view, different things. And out of the 22, there's probably 3/4 of those fit in that legally non-conforming. There was only a handful, which Mr. Seegers was one of them, who come every month. His was one of the properties, and even out the property really right out there. You know, that was one he wanted to know who turned it in for. Regents, Mimosa, Cemetery, or Chestnut, State Street, Normal, all those little areas. He had a whole packet full of those photos. But for the most part, 3/4 of them were fine. It's just the ones that had made some changes and needed to bring them up to the.
So nobody's picking on him.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I have a question for we, what are these other things about managing government records and?
I'll talk to y'all about those after we,
It's reading material.
yeah. Those were sent to me from our
Books.
assistant city clerk, so I had to distribute those to you.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Okay, Deere, Thomas, Deere,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes.
Dearbone,
Yes.
Eggleton,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you all.